Hey everyone, and welcome back to Learn to Program. In the last episode, we talked about what programming is, what languages there are, and how to set up our programming environment. So hopefully by now you should have a nice fresh installation of Python, installed on your computer, and a text editor of your choice as well. So in this episode, we're actually going to write our very first computer program. You might think that sounds like a pretty huge step and a pretty big undertaking, but a computer program can be actually very, very simple and not always that useful. So we'll get right into it here. I guess before we write any code, we're going to double check a few settings here. So for those of you who are not using gedit, this might not apply to you. But if you followed along in the last video, you might want to change a couple settings here just to make things easier for us. So if you look down on the bottom bar, there's kind of a mode here that says plain text. Well, we want to be in Python so that the editor can recognize Python-specific words and bits of code. So if you click on that, you can see there's a bunch of different languages here, and we want to scroll all the way down to Python. So we'll go ahead and select that. And one other thing we want to change is we want to go into Edit, Preferences, and to the editor. And we just want to make sure that it's a good idea to have a tab width of 4 spaces, and we want to check off this insert spaces instead of tabs. It might be a little bit difficult to understand why at the moment, but it'll be very useful in the future when we start writing some bigger programs. So we'll get more into that later. So with that said, we are basically ready to write our first line of code. So without further ado, here it is. And believe it or not, that is a complete computer program. So it doesn't look like a whole heck of a lot here, but we'll go ahead and see what it does. At the moment we have no idea, so we're going to go ahead and try to run it and find out. So first let's save this. So we're going to save this as a computer program somewhere, and we're going to call this first program.py. So first program, meaning it's our first program, and .py just tells the computer that it's a Python file, so that's fairly important. And just to take note, I'm saving it in my desktop. You can save it anywhere you like as long as you know where that is, just so we know where to run it. So I'll go ahead and save that. Now, to run this program, in the previous episode I talked about locating a command prompt and running that. So if you pop open your start menu here, we will type in cmd into the search bar, and you should see this cmd.exe. So we'll go ahead and pop that open. And again, like I said in the last episode, this is where we will be running all of our programs from. So now again, it's important to remember where you saved your program so that you can run it from here properly. So right now, my program is saved on my desktop. Well, I have to get to my desktop in here. So the way to do that is by changing directories. And you change directories by entering the command cd, which stands for change directory, space, and then whatever or wherever your program is saved. So for me it is C users John desktop. So I'll go ahead and enter that in. And then you just press enter, and now I'm in my desktop, so I should be able to run my program. To run my program, I simply type Python and then the name of my program, which is first program.py. And let's see what my program does. Well, it printed the number 1 to my command prompt, and maybe that's to be expected now in hindsight when we look at the code and it says print 1. So as you can see, this program didn't do a whole heck of a lot. It wasn't very useful, but hey, it did what we told it to do. So by definition, this is a computer program. So similarly, we can kind of do the following. Maybe if I change this to, let's say, this is my second program, and then maybe underneath that I'll also print out, I'm getting the hang of this. So we'll go ahead and resave that, and then we'll run that again. So Python first program.py, and it printed out what we told it to print out. So if you hadn't noticed by now, print is kind of a special word in Python that kind of tells the computer to print out to the command prompt whatever follows it. So I could say something like print X, and it'll print that out to the command prompt. So that's not all that useful for us at the moment. It doesn't really accomplish anything, but it does do what we tell it to do. So this is a computer program. So following along with that, we'll see what else this print thing can do. So we'll go ahead and get rid of this. Let's see if our computer can do math at all. So let's try and saying, print 2 plus 2. And we'll go ahead and save that, and then we'll run it again. Python first program.py. And it certainly printed out the value of 2 plus 2, which is 4. So great, it can do math. Maybe we can try doing something like, division. So we'll go 18 divided by 6. And of course, when we run it, after we save it, we should get a nice value of 3. So now you might start to understand a little bit how programs can be useful. Doing math is never usually a fun thing, no matter what numbers they are. But let's say you had a really big number, like, I don't know, that, and we wanted to divide that by 5. Well, it's not fun doing that by hand, so let's program our computer to do that for us. So let's run that. And well, that's a number that I have no idea whether it's right or wrong, but I can tell you for sure it is right. But this is one of the beautiful things about programming, is that sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong. In math cases like this, the math is always right. So that's the beauty of that. So I guess as an aside, just before I kind of end this lesson and kick off into the next lesson, why don't you try doing something like printing 54 plus the letter A. So let's try running that and see what that does. So we'll go ahead and do this, first program.py, and we get an error. And that error pretty much means nothing to us at the moment, but it does lead off into our next lesson kind of nicely. The next lesson will kind of talk about data types and what that means for a computer program. So thanks very much, and stay tuned for the next episode.